Have you ever been asked what's actually working in your life and realized that you haven't stopped to consider exactly what that is? What if the most important question in a loving relationship isn't who is right, but what would love do now? What might change if instead of fixing what's hard in your relationship, you did more of what already works? Recently, a woman physician I know well asked me to share the secret of my successful relationship with my neurodivergent husband with a large group of women physicians in one of her programs. What I shared was that I don't have secrets, but I do have an approach. And that is what I plan to share in today's podcast. Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang. We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice. Welcome to today's episode of the Healing Medicine Podcast's Relationship Lessons for Women Physicians and What 40 Years of Love Has Taught Me. This episode today is going to be about physician marriages and emotional labor and 40 years from practicing love. So why I'm recording this today is that it felt quite relevant to me to share this idea of what's working. And the woman physician who asked me this question was actually a money coach. And she understands wealth deeply. And as many of our ongoing listeners know, wealth and money are growth edge areas for me. And I don't consider myself a money person per se. But she reached out to me because she told me that she sees relationships as a form of wealth. And she said, when I look at your life, I see someone who has figured out relationships and love. This was a little amusing to me because I don't walk around thinking I figured out love, but I have committed to love. And what I realized is that what she really wanted to know was what was working. And that was what she wanted me to talk about to her group. And what's working well is one of my favorite questions. It's one I ask in group coaching quite often. It's a strengths-based question and an invitation to notice and reflect and pay attention to not just the good things, but the ways in which you do things that are working, that are giving you results that you want or that feel good to you. And that when something works, it's important to pause and to notice and to reflect. And so while I don't consider myself an expert on love or what's working in relationships or on wealth, I do have 40 years of lived experience in the same relationship. I have 40 years of having made choices and of practicing. And not practicing secrets, but practicing an approach. And as most of our listeners know, I am practicing this approach in the context of a neurodivergent and neurodiverse relationship where I have done a lot of intentional work. All of that work has been coaching. I have done 0 couples therapy, 0 formal marriage counseling. It has been mostly personal and individual work that changed how I showed up and how I chose to approach my relationship. And that has changed everything. So once again, my message here is that these are not secrets. They're not tips or tools or tricks. They're an approach, an intentional approach, and a purposeful approach. And for me, as usual, it boils down to this one question: what would love do? And in specific situations, what would love do now? For those of you listening who are like me, someone who carries a lot of responsibility and pressure and emotional labor, there's often a lot of resentment in long-term relationships. And that is what I hear people coming to me complaining about. And relationships become a place where this heavy load of emotional labor plays out. And so I just want to acknowledge that as we're diving into these conversations. And what I'm offering is support for you within the relationship, especially if you're coming at it from that direction. And that what is in our control is how we choose to approach our relationships. So relationships don't thrive because you find the perfect person or the perfect recipe. They thrive and grow because of the way you approach them and last, I will say. And your approach, as I like to say, determines your landing again and again and again. An approach is an intention, a tone, and an energy, an intentional way to show up for moments, choices, big decisions, little decisions. And can you approach your relationship from a place of love, letting love be your filter? And so that filter is my refined approach to experimenting, learning, growing, choosing, and practicing love over 40 years. So my number one approach is to replace expectations with intentions. One of the fastest ways to drain love out of a relationship is expectations. And they're often silent or unsaid or not even known by the other person. I used to think that my partner should simply know, especially after we had been in a relationship for so long. He should be able to read my mind. He should know me well. That was a measure of caring and love, but it's not. He should notice what I notice, fix things when they're off, and anticipate what I might need. And those of you who are in neurodiverse relationships know that that is unlikely, and it's not actually a measure or reflection of love at all. And when partners don't read our minds, notice what we want, feel what we're feeling, anticipate what we need, or be steps ahead of us, we get upset. We think that we're not seen, we're not valued, they don't love us, and it's not that at all. So intentions are completely different than expectations. They're lighter, they're kinder, they're like a GPS, and they anchor us in possibility rather than resentment. So instead of asking these questions, they should know what I need, they should know what I'm thinking, know what I want, know what I like. You can show up with the intention of connection, or with the intention of kindness, or peace, or joy. And when you show up with an intention, connection, kindness, peace, joy, love, you ask yourself, what would connection do? What would kindness do? What would peace do? What would joy do? Maybe even what would repair do? And that opens doors. That's the power of intentions rather than expectations. Expectations close doors and intentions open doors. It isn't that expectations are wrong or that you should have no standards whatsoever. We all have standards and non-negotiables, but it's limiting those to the smallest pieces we can. Most of us, especially those of us who are women in medicine, have piles of expectations, and we have high expectations, sometimes even unreasonable expectations. We've also rarely verbalized them. We have, in coaching, we call them manuals, and this is something that you learn a lot about in mindful love and in relationship coaching. But manuals are essentially expectations for our partner. What we think that a good partner slash husband, spouse, what child, whatever it is, should do. And most of us think that our expectations are very specific and very detailed and potentially long. So we have such high expectations for ourselves as women in medicine that we have high expectations for others as well, often even unrealistic. So I encourage you to think about replacing your expectations with intentions and see what happens. It is one of the most transformative approaches to a relationship. And remembering your approach determines your landing. If you show up with intentions, kindness, connection, love, repair, things go very differently. So my number 2 approach to sustaining a long-term relationship for a very long time is to choose love again and again, and to treat love as a verb, not just as something you feel, but something you choose. It's an action. So can you choose love in the middle of the kitchen, in the middle of an argument, in the middle of chaos, when you're conflicted? Can you choose love when you're tired? Can you choose love when you are more than tired? And that's where this question, what would love do now, is so important. And even more important is don't just ask it, but then do it. So what would love do now? Do that. And remembering that it's not always the same, and that love is honest, love is courageous, love is curious, love is direct, love is vulnerable, love is grounded. So love looks different in every moment. Sometimes love is speaking up with kindness. Sometimes it's waiting and being patient. Sometimes love is letting go, one of the hardest ones. Sometimes love is pressing pause. Let's talk about this later. Sometimes love is doing what we're doing here, focusing on what's working rather than what's not. Strengths-based growth. Remembering that love is not a passive thing. It's responsive. In fact, love is actually proactive. Number 3 approach that I love is the idea of practice. And that love is a practice. We've had, my husband and I, 40 years to practice. We haven't been married for all 40 years, but we continue to practice love, kindness, patience, listening, grace. And to be absolutely fair, some days we practice well and some days we don't. But we do commit to continuing to practice. Just like medicine, love is a practice. And just like medicine does no harm, love as an approach and intention does no intentional harm. It doesn't mean we don't hurt someone inadvertently, but love attempts to do no harm. And this does not mean that you understand each other all the time. It does not mean you're not annoyed. It doesn't mean you are connected all the time. It's a practice of growing love. A little bit like gardening. You just keep nurturing it, watering it, fertilizing it as a practice, and things grow. And in some years, they grow crazy, crazy abundantly, and in other years, not so much. And remembering that love is very much a long game. And that love is a practice. Number 4 approach that I want to share today is to prioritize your health, each of your health. And this is one that I don't hear in too many spaces, but for us, it's been really critical. Prioritizing that your physical health, mental health, nervous system health. And I think it might be actually the most important, because when we are not well physically or mentally, the relationship doesn't go well. When our nervous systems are not healthy or regulated, nothing goes well. Things that are neutral feel critical. Someone's completely innocuous request feels like a demand or a complaint, and we start reacting rather than responding. And it's usually when we are depleted or unwell. And so if I look back over our 4 decades of a neurodiverse relationship, we have taken turns having challenges. And if we look at it, I went to medical school, he went to law school. I was sick at certain points, he was sick at certain points. I pivoted, then he pivoted. We've adjusted, we've made space. So recognizing that at different points, someone else's health might get in the way. Someone else's mental health might get in the way. Reactive nervous systems might get in the way. I wasn't the most responsive and patient human during residency when I was so depleted, neither when I was postpartum. And so recognizing that prioritizing that so that when those are well, they can feed your relationship is super helpful. And it doesn't mean that everybody gets it all at the same time. It often means compromise. It sometimes means choosing something totally new, like this new path that we are on that has the potential to optimize the body, mind, spirit, nervous system health of both of us. It also often means protecting the other person's health when you can see that there's something that's draining them, because sometimes we can't always see it. And so making sure that you take care of your health and you keep an eye on your partner's health, and that you also take responsibility for your own health and wellness. We often describe love as sacrifice, but healthy relationships are not from a place of sacrifice. They're from a place of loving commitment, supporting the other person when they need support, but also taking care of yourself. And that's really what coaching and mindfulness help you do. They help you take care of your physical health, your mental health, and be intentional and strategic in your relationships. And so these are the kinds of things that we talk about in Mindful Love, because they're about empowering you and not making everything all or none, black or white. There are seasons in relationships, there are seasons of health and wellness and careers and all kinds of things. And so there are lots of different ways of approaching it and different stories you can tell, generous stories, that help support relationships over the long term. One of the other approaches that supports relationship for the long term is friendship. And I think above all, you want to stay friends, and friends have fun. And in friends do lighthearted micro moment things. And I think that friendship is often underrated in long-term love. And friends take things lightly generally. They have a human expectations. Friends often have lower expectations of each other than we do for our partners, where we have these very high expectations. Friends are on the same team. And I think that friends have fun, and fun is what I would call a fertilizer for intimacy, recognizing that fun looks different at different times and different ages. And that while relationships lean into date nights and having things be so important, but remembering that it's the friendship and the connection where the love grows, in the small choices of tone, attention, paying attention, looking up, being present. And so letting some of that lighthearted, less formal, less heavy relationship of just simply being friends and what would you do with a friend and how would you approach a friend could really change things for you. My number 6 approach is trust as an intention, choosing trust in each other, choosing values, and trusting that you will both grow and change and still be there for one another. There's a great Bruce Springsteen song about how when someone falls behind, you'll wait for them. And I think it's this beautiful way of waiting for one another along the way. You both aren't on the same trajectory, the same path, and that this trust is really built in the showing up and the staying and the trying again. And so if trust is your intention and it is your approach, that can be incredibly sustaining for a relationship. And I think a lot of people say, well, we don't have shared hobbies or we have to spend time together. And my thought is you don't have to. You have to have shared values, because when you have shared values and you have shared trust over a long haul, things can change and grow and you can have different hobbies along the way. But if that's your rudder, things will turn out okay. And so I love to think about the values that you might have and you might want to bring, and those might be the intention that you want to bring and the way that you are moving forward in a long-term, healthy, wealthy relationship. So they might be respect, they might be honesty or integrity, they might be kindness. You might want to lean into a shared version of what a good life looks like, and remembering that that's going to change over time. If you are with someone from 15 to 55, things absolutely shift over time, and what a good life looks like changes. So growth is going to be integral and necessary. It's not the problem. You're going to keep growing. And love actually would expect growth. It allows it, it embraces it at different times, and things look different. And it allows growth in your intentions, your ideas, your vision, what lights you up, what makes you feel alive. And so trust and values that allow growth and change and non-judgment, perhaps, of someone else's pace or the phase or stage that they are in. Thinking about it as a long game. So a couple of others I want to bring up are letting things go as an approach. So that is one of the approaches of mindfulness, and perhaps collaborating. So we can drop things, forgive, forget, allow space. And then collaborating is sort of the teamwork. You are co-creating a life. And it doesn't mean that you do everything the same. In fact, it means that you might do what you enjoy and they might do what they enjoy. And then you have a pile of things that nobody enjoys. And remembering that you don't have to agree on absolutely everything. You don't have to understand absolutely everything. You can let go of those things and choose to collaborate on the things that work for you. I also want to bring in, and I think I've lost my numbers here, mindset, and that assuming good intent. I love to think about this as generosity in the mindset schema. Having generous stories, assuming good intent, positive intent, focusing on what's working, is incredibly powerful. And that's choosing your mindset, choosing to pay attention on purpose to what's working and what feels good, and choosing to remember who you're talking to, someone you love and someone who loves you. We often forget that as we get caught up in the details of who did or didn't do what. So love would choose a generous story and have your relationship be more of a sanctuary, generous, beautiful space like Nicasio Creek Farm, as opposed to a battlefield. So looping back around, a reminder that your approach determines the landing. How you choose to show up is your approach, the tone and energy you bring to your relationship, your strategy, the things you choose to focus on and pay attention to, and leaning into those is the secret to a healthy long-term relationship. There are no little fast secrets, hacks. It's really being consistent in your approach, sharing values, not necessarily hobbies, taking care of your health and the other person's health, and truly choosing your own approach. You cannot choose for other people. That's the expectation. So leaning into your own intentions about what you want to bring to the relationship, that's what's in your control. So if you happen to be in the category of people for whom relationships are challenging, and that is for many women in medicine, a lot of it is because of the thought patterns that we're bringing to our relationships, which are not the approaches I have shared above. So remembering to go back to what are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you want to bring to the relationship? And remembering that healthy relationships are not effortless, but they're also not super hard. They grow, and that when you keep choosing love over and over and over again, it deepens and grows over time. So can you choose to approach your relationship from a place of love? What would love do now? And that is where I will leave this episode. I would encourage you to consider joining Mindful Love if you want to work on your relationships. It's where I share all of the coaching approaches as they lend themselves to relationships. And when your relationships go well, everything else goes well. There is a lot that we can learn that we weren't taught anywhere. And I do want to lean back into my friend, the money coach, who she's right, that relationships are a form of wealth. And when your relationships go well, other things go well. And healthy relationships are one of the most important things you can do for your finances, for your physical health, for your mental health, and for your life happiness and satisfaction. And so if that sounds fun, I really encourage you to join me. I do not teach the Mindful Love group that often. Every other year is sort of my cadence, but I would love to have you join me if it's of interest. We start March 5th, which is soon. And so I encourage you to just not miss out. Your future self, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, when you're looking back at your own relationship, will thank you. There is no more important work that coaching has impacted than my relationship. And I would love to share those tools with more of you. I also encourage you to go back to previous podcast episodes. There are many, many, many podcast episodes on mindful love and neurodiverse relationships, and you can start by listening to those. But again, the listening is not the same as engaging. Consuming, hearing, doing it in a passive manner is very different than jumping into the coaching where you learn how to integrate it and practice it in your own life. And you learn how to see the spots that are truly getting in your way of having the relationship that you want. We always default to how the other person is getting in the way of the relationships that we want. And in coaching, we focus on what we're doing and what we can change. And then when we change, people around us change, and hopefully they change in ways we want. If they don't, you can always try something else. But almost everyone who is in a loving relationship came to it for good reasons and wants to play it out in full and make sure that they've given it the best chance they can to succeed. And I'm hoping that many of these tips from today will help you do that. And if you're interested in exploring it further, join me for Mindful Love. May you all be well. May you all be safe. And may you all have a beautiful week of being friends, laughing, loving, and having fun with those that you love.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find me, Chang Liang, at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence.
Welcome to today's Mindful Moment, a reflection on showing up with intention rather than expectation. Taking a moment at the outset to find steady within, close your eyes if it's safe to do so, reconnect to your breath, and arrive back into your body for simply a few minutes. Taking in a big intentional inhale and a huge exhale. And a pause to notice how you feel at the outset. What kind of energy does the invitation of choosing an intention rather than expectation bring to you? Does the idea of letting go of an expectation feel stressful? Does it feel like having no standards, being overwhelmed, to having to do it all yourself? Bringing a hand to heart for any resistance that comes up, and allowing yourself here a moment to consider what things might feel like if you had standards, but instead you approach them from a place of intention. How might showing up with love or kindness or a desire for connection change the energy behind requests? How might showing up with intention on purpose from a place of love, from a place of caring, from a case of valuing your relationship and your partner, how might the way you interact and the way you approach the things that you would like in your relationship feel differently? How might they land differently? Taking a moment to breathe in 3 big deep breaths, inhales and exhales. Allowing yourself to soften to this idea, breathing in and out. And once more, breathing in and out. Noticing any resistance that comes up. What if you tried showing up more with a focus on intention rather than expectation? Not what you want or need or require, but what you hope for, what you would love to bring, what you would love to experience in your relationship. And letting your asks, wants, desires be transmitted and communicated through the lens of love. How would love ask for this? How would love approach the fact that I would like X, Y, or Z? What would look different? How would someone who cares and feels connected to my partner ask? How would she approach a list of mismatched expectations? Rather than thinking about the expectations or standards or how you have different ways of moving through the world. Focus on the shared intention. And how can you bring that shared intention as a way to optimize, get more of the things that would feel good to you in your relationship? How might it create space for the person you love to show up differently? Remembering that if you don't like it, you can always go back to having expectations. But my hunch is that those expectations and how you feel about expectations doesn't actually get you the intention that you want from your relationship. Pausing and taking another big deep breath here. Filling yourself with love, kindness, and care. And maybe opening up the possibility of things looking and feeling different in the future. How would love choose to move forward in your relationship? How would love choose to communicate with your partner? If you knew that you were going to be married for 40 years or together for 40 years or 50 years, what advice would that version of you give to you wherever you are in your relationship now? How might she recommend you show up? Might she recommend focusing more on your intentions, what you'd like to bring, what you hope for, what you aspire for, than expectations, what someone should do or what you expect them to do? What if that wise woman's advice helps you to have a relationship that feels more equal, grounded, loving, caring? What if it results in something that feels even more valuable, even more loving, even more exciting, connected, and engaging? Bringing a hand to heart here, taking in 2 more deep breaths. And 1 more. Sending yourself kindness and compassion for the journey of loving relationships. And asking yourself this question: what might your next step in your relationship be? Might it be replacing expectations with intentions? Might it be joining me for mindful love? Or if you're listening to this years from now and I'm recording it, reaching out for one-on-one coaching, what might it be? How would you like things to be? What's your intention? What would you like your relationship to feel like? And what is your next step towards that? May you all be well. May all your relationships be full of love, kindness, communication, and connection. And may they all last in a rewarding way for you and your partner. Have a beautiful week. with love. Namaste.